Dozens of people have vanished on a mountain in Zimbabwe. Not in storms, not in avalanches, on a wide open plateau, in broad daylight. Hikers walk behind a rock and never come back. Groups become suddenly, impossibly disoriented. Even experienced soldiers patrolling this area, and who know the plateau, have become disoriented there. And in one chilling case, a government minister, his delegation, and soldiers who knew the terrain well disappeared. Locals who live around the mountain have followed strict rules for decades. Rules they believe keep you from disappearing too. They call this place a gateway. A mountain that doesn't just confuse people, it swallows them. Welcome to Mount Nyangani. The mountain is located in eastern Zimbabwe. Mount Nyangani has earned a reputation that stretches back generations. Many of the incidents reported here share unsettling similarities with the missing 411 cases of David Paulides. But there's one detail that makes this mountain stand out. In 2014, a high-profile public figure vanished here together with an Indian delegation. Since then, researchers and authorities have been trying to understand what is really happening on the mountain. The native people who live there have long had an explanation for what happens there. They call it Kemitsa, and we will talk about that shortly. That could perhaps be a first approach to explaining what is going on in the national parks of our world. What you see here is Mount Nyangani, a mountain that doesn't come to a point, but has a wide plateau at the top. It is located in the oldest national park in Zimbabwe and is 2,500 meters high. The front side drops away in a steep, dramatic cliff, while the backside of the mountain rises much more gradually. It takes several hours before you reach this plateau at the top. It is an adventurous hiking trail, and there are several paths that lead up to this plateau. Mount Nyangani isn't some remote, forgotten peak, it's a major tourist destination. Almost every tour group visiting Zimbabwe ends up here, and the mountain sees a steady flow of hikers and visitors. Over the years, access has even been improved. Today, a drivable road leads part of the way up to the plateau, but despite the crowds, despite the development, the locals didn't give it the nickname the mountain that swallows people, without a reason. According to the native communities who still live in the surrounding area, people have been disappearing on this mountain for generations. Their accounts speak of many villagers who simply never came back, and it isn't just history. Even today, people still vanish here, suddenly and without explanation. The reports coming off this mountain are deeply unsettling. In 2014, 2 incidents on Mount Nyangani caused such alarm that the Zimbabwe government was forced to respond. One of them involved a tourist named Said Dada. He was hiking up the mountain with his wife and another couple. When they reached the plateau, the group decided to continue toward the front edge to take in the view. About halfway there, they stopped for a short break. The terrain up there is dry, open ground scattered with stones, no cliffs, no deep cracks, nowhere obvious to fall, just a wide exposed area. During the break, Sayed Dada stepped behind a large rock to relieve himself, but he never came back. His companions eventually started looking for him, and you have to picture it. As I said, the terrain is flat and open. You can see for a great distance if anything is moving out there. But there was no sign of him. A very large search operation was launched, involving police and military units on the ground and in the air. Yet, Said Dada remained as if swallowed by the mountain, missing to this day. And he's not the only one. Similar cases continue to occur on the mountain even in the modern times. But to understand this case, we need to step back for a moment, because what Said Dada did behind that rock may be more important than it seems. As mentioned, he relieved himself, or more bluntly, he took a piss break. And on this mountain, that matters. According to the native communities living around Mount Nyangani, people have been disappearing here for centuries. Over time, strict rules developed about how visitors must behave on the mountain. Rules believed to prevent you from becoming the next person who vanishes. Now you could say, just don't go up there, that's the best solution. That's true. But the fact is that many wild animals roam on this plateau, which were important for people's nutrition in the past. That's why hunters were always up there. And over the centuries, a code of conduct developed on how to behave on this mountain to avoid disappearing. In the belief of the native people living around this mountain, Mount Nyangani is home to spirits and demons. And if you anger them with your behavior, the consequences on this mountain may be severe. That's why these rules exist. First of all, stay away from the sacred places, because there you are hopelessly lost. If you see a colorful snake, a pot without fire, or a stone made of gold, that's the spirit's attempt to lure you into a trap. Do not approach the snake, do not pick up the pot or the stone. Under no circumstances may you urinate on this mountain, which is exactly what Saeed Dada did. Why you are not allowed to pee there isn't recorded, but it is one of the rules. Absolutely no piss breaks up there. Avoid any form of swearing or curses, or no sex, whether alone or with a partner, and under no circumstances wear red clothing. And to be sure you survive the trip up and down the mountain, first contact one of the village elders, who will tell you whether the time is good or bad for going up this mountain. These are the rules of the locals living there regarding climbing the mountain. These rules are centuries old, not some modern invention, and they have been followed there for generations. But it is safe to say that most tourists climbing this mountain today don't pay much attention to them. A minister of the country named Xavier Kasukuwere was there with an Indian economic delegation. They were in the country for several days. It was about economic relations between Zimbabwe and India, and there was a supporting program. And part of this supporting program was a visit to the mountain. At first, everything seemed to be going well. The minister was there with the 5 delegation members and 4 armed soldiers. A later report reveals the following. Suddenly, everyone became disoriented. They weren't dazed or confused. They suddenly had no idea where they were or which way to go. And this also affected the soldiers, who usually know the area up there really well because they patrol there often. The group climbed a small rock, maybe 10 meters high, hoping to spot some landmark from up there that they could use to reorient themselves. But even from that rock, everything seemed very strange to them. They decided to sit down on this rock and try to collect themselves, because the whole situation was slowly causing panic among the Indian delegation. The minister later explained that they sat there for about an hour. Then they suddenly saw soldiers walking across the plateau, apparently searching for something, and planes were cycling over the plateau. A group of soldiers walked right past the base of the 10-meter high rock they were sitting on. The minister and the Indian delegation called out loudly and waved, but the soldiers showed no reaction. It was as if they were completely invisible to those soldiers. And it was the same with the helicopters and planes that crossed the plateau. The group waved and screamed loudly, but there was no reaction. 4 days later, the group was suddenly discovered by a search team, in perfect health, not dehydrated, not starving, but completely fit, just very glad to have finally been found. And now comes the crucial part. This delegation and the minister had been missing for 4 days, and a gigantic search operation had been launched. Clearly, when a foreign delegation and a minister disappear, a lot is set in motion to find these people. But these people, the delegation and the minister, were then very surprised because for themselves, only a few hours had passed, as they said. For the native people there, such incidents are nothing new. As mentioned at the beginning, they even have a name for it, Kemitsa. In fact, the only people who may hold answers are the local communities who have lived around this mountain for generations. And they believe they already know what is happening. Kemitsa is described by the local people as a kind of limbo, a state between 2 worlds. According to their belief, certain gates exist on the mountain. These gates are said to lead to another world. But you don't arrive there directly. Instead, you end up trapped in an in-between realm. No longer in your own world, but not fully in the next one either. And it's questionable whether you would even want to be. If you fail to find the exit, you remain stuck in this in-between state forever. Those people are considered lost, and the ones who do return, locals believe they are simply the ones who, by pure chance, manage to find their way back, often through the very same gate they unknowingly entered. When you are in this in-between world, it is said that you can be there for weeks, even months. And when you find the exit, you return exactly to the point where you started. That means time passes completely differently there. This isn't something the locals just made up recently. Kemitsa is an ancient legend. But disappearances aren't the only strange events reported on this mountain. Hiking groups and climbers have reportedly encountered people standing motionless in the open terrain, almost as if in a trance, barely responsive. When approached, these individuals appear exhausted, their eyes look empty, and they struggle to comprehend what's being said to them. Concerned hikers usually don't leave them there. Instead, they guide them down the mountain toward the valley, and something strange happens. The farther they move away from the exact spot where the person was found, the faster the individual seems to recover and become fully alert. Many are then shocked to learn they had apparently been standing in that same spot for several hours. Some hiker groups report a strange fog forming above them, which then descends and completely envelops them. When they try to escape it, the fogs move with them. No matter how fast they run, the cloud continues to surround them, almost as if it's pursuing them. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it stops. The fog lifts back into the sky and dissolves. Those caught inside report no physical changes and nothing unusual in their surroundings. Why this happens remains impossible to explain. Things have changed there since 2014, because it was that year when an unusually high number of people disappeared, prompting the government to finally act. All access routes that can be used to reach the mountain are now guarded by soldiers. You must take a mountain guide, meaning a local who knows the area. You must prove that you have a fully charged mobile phone with you and a flashlight with fresh batteries. The government itself has already set up several mobile phone towers there, and paths have been marked that you are not allowed to leave. These paths are based on investigations conducted there to figure out what is actually going on this mountain. Based on the cases, they have roughly outlined the areas where nothing has happened so far, and the paths now lead through these areas. Some critics say the stories around Mount Nyangani are exaggerated. In their view, traditional beliefs play a major role, even within government circles, and the missing cases likely have ordinary explanations, such as accidents or missteps in the terrain. But there's a problem with that theory. The summit is a wide open plateau with few obvious places to fall, and Mount Nyangani isn't the only location with repeated disappearances reports. Similar patterns have been reported in national parks around the world, including the well-known Missing 411 cases. And the reports haven't stopped. Even in recent years, there have been dozens of accounts from people who claim to have experienced something similar. Moments where they seemed invisible to others, or cases where they believed only an hour had passed, while in reality several days had gone by. In future videos, we will take a closer look at more of these cases. It's also worth noting that researcher David Paulides has spent years collecting and documenting many of these exact incidents in his books, pointing to precise patterns across different locations. What do you think about today's case? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.